Alright, I'm ready to start. For those who don't know me, I'm Barbie. I'm looking after CPAN Testers pretty much most of the time these days. And this talks generally about how we've come to look at CPAN Testers, how it was working, how it wasn't working, and we've looked at improving it so it can be reused in the future to the volumes we're kind of seeing, but also the method we're actually submitting reports changed. So this kind of looks at various aspects of how we've changed, look at some of the details behind the scenes, and lastly I'll look at how you can actually be involved in the new style of CPAN Testers. So firstly, what is our CPAN Testers? One of the quotes I've seen about it, I didn't actually write it. The objective of the group is to test as many of the distributions on CPAN as possible and as many platforms. I'm not sure exactly where that kind of came about, but it's something that's more or less evolved. When we first started testing CPAN distributions, it was pretty much isolated testers testing just on their own machines when they install stuff. As it's gone on, more and more people have got involved and looked at more of the weird, wonderful platforms that people can run at. And I've added those to their testing repertoire. The ultimate goal is to improve portability and reliability, and also providing good feedback back to authors. Because ultimately, we're not reporting back to authors problems that users potentially can see whenever they improve CPAN. So that's kind of the ethos behind what CPAN Testers was about and is still about. And where our background is aiming. So looking at some of the pros and cons of what CPAN Testers is about. It began in August 1999, as mentioned. It was a few testers submitting when they were reports pretty much. But as you can see, there were only a few reports being submitted a week really. And then all of a sudden, 2002, pretty much when we had CPAN Plus, have a bit more automation provided, scripts to submit reports. There was kind of a bit of a jump, and it's been increasing ever since. I mean, this is just up until about 2005. We have a look at the graph that's later than that, previously in the line. So we've got 11 years worth of testing, which has been quite cool, really. We now have roughly about 150 volunteers, not necessarily every month. We usually have about 100 a month. But over the course of about 2 to 3 months, there's usually about 150 different people submitting tests. We're currently testing on around about 10 to 15 different operating systems a month. On top of that, we've got around about 60 to 80 different architectures. Obviously, the architecture, things like x32 and x64 on what is single operating system, and there's various other combinations in between that, threaded and all sorts of things. And we're currently testing with roughly around about 20 to 30 different types of Perl releases. So some of them are new Perl, some of them are regular Perl releases, some of them are very, very old, and some of them are fairly recent, stable versions. We're currently seeing around about 1,000 distributions being submitted to CPAN every month. And as a consequence of that, we're actually seeing around about 45,000 reports. This was actually taken in November 2009 before we calmed down a bit while we sorted out the CPAN Tester stuff, but it's quite a high volume. So, looking at some of the cons, it started in August 1999, got 150 volunteers, and pretty much the same as the others. One of the problems with submitting for 45,000 reports a month, in some respects it can be quite easy to analyse stuff and put things in the right boxes. But from an author's point of view, it can be quite intimidating. One of the other problems is a lot of this information getting through to the stats reports, sites and things, it's a bit overwhelming. And we wanted to actually look at how we could actually improve it so that we streamline it more, we validate it more, and all this kind of thing. So, looking at some of the problems, the old version is SMTP based, which naturally has a slow feedback loop. One of the problems you've got with SMT is you send off your report via email, and you can potentially wait a day or two before you actually see that report appear, for various reasons. And if there's any problems with that report, it can even take even longer, possibly a week, before somebody spots it and realises there's a problem there, and then we try and fix it. The problem is we're fixing it too late, so it still exists, we just generally have to hide it. We're regularly having reports that are well over 50k for various reasons. People put loads of diagnostics in, or there's lots of problems that are spitting out lots of information, and the SMTP gateway just can't cope with it. So Pill.org server side, they actually truncate manually. So some of the client test smokers will actually try and be clever and truncate the actual the output, the tap output, rather than the report, because there's a lot of information that you don't really want to lose. As I mentioned, there's no server-side validation, which makes it a bit difficult. So if there is a problem with a particular report, or a smoker's gone AWOL, there's nothing we can really do about it. We have to do everything after the fact. It's also NNT based, so when all the feeds we're getting, essentially the NNTP is our data store, and it's at the moment there's just under 8 million reports. That's really, really hard for them to manage at the moment. It regularly overwhelms the mail server, because the mail server is actually hosting the NNTP service, and basically it's taken the SMTP email, translating it into an NNTP format, and storing it in a file system. As a consequence of that, it's just often exceeds the capacity of the NNTP file system. Quite often you'll see blocks that will just suddenly disappear because the file system can't cope with it, and it runs out of items. And with 8 million reports, it's a bit of a problem. We've been mentioning it for quite some time, but time was around for a time for a change. So really look at what we're actually doing, how we can actually improve it, and as I mentioned, how we can improve it for the future, so we can scale to much more than the capacity of what we're seeing at the moment. So as a consequence, we came up with CPAN Testers 2.0. Before January this year, pretty much, I mean, this is a very simplistic diagram of how things flow through the system. There's a lot of it's missing, but hopefully this gives you a bit of a picture of what's actually kind of happening. You've essentially got two smoke reporters, one based on CPAN, one based on CPAN Plus. There's lots of stuff around that. There's various smokers, relay systems, automated systems, process systems, turnkey systems, etc. But they pretty much all of them use one of those two. They both feed into Test Reporter, which then feeds into the old system, the SMTP gateway, which then translates into the NTP. The generator then feeds off that NTP service, supplies data to the CPAN stats database, and then it feeds out to all the various websites. Up until December, things were creaking, and then in December, Robert and Ask, who run the Pill.org server, basically said, look, things are getting stupid. We're basically seeing more reports to the mailing list, CPAN Testers mailing list in a day than we see pretty much on every single other mailing list in a month. And it was just getting ridiculous. So they basically asked us to throttle our reports, submissions, so that they can actually manage things a bit better. And kind of said, look, we really need this to move on. We're going to set a 1st of March deadline, and we're going to cut it off. The mailing list is just going to stop. At that point, Dave Golden said, look, we're going to have to do something. Seeing as he'd already written some of the design for the database, he sat down and thought about a project plan, how we can actually take what we've got at the moment, most of it is all in design stages, and actually implement something. In January 2010, we started to see the submissions drop. There were some glitches there, but we responded to them very quickly. But pretty much we were down to roughly about 5,000 reports per month from that point onwards. And basically the coding began. In February we started with the initial tests, and essentially what we had, pretty much the same kind of scenario. Rather than submitting via SMTP, it was just going through HTTP. Instead of the NMTP data store, we were using what was returned as Metabase, and the generator was written so you could actually pull from the Metabase. This wasn't live until around about mid-May, I think it was. But essentially that was running in the background just for us to test to make sure things were running correctly. So we're running things side by side, pretty much as it is at the moment. So essentially we started with a lot of the trial with the HTTP, got a lot of bug reports, found a lot of errors, fixed a lot of them very quickly. The only problem was, because of all the feedback, even though we've got a lot of volunteers helping out, we did actually miss the March 1st deadline. Thankfully, Robert and Nats were very, very kind and basically said, look, we can actually see you're actually doing something, you're getting a hell of a long way towards what we want, so we're not going to switch you off. As long as you keep it, the mailing list down to 5,000 mails per month, then we can cope with that. So essentially, they left it up to us, but kind of said, look, you need to do this as quickly as you can, but we'll hang on for you. Mid-May, pretty much everything was going pretty smoothly. All the beta testing went well. So we actually did a quiet release on roughly around the 1st of June, and the only thing you'd probably notice if you were watching the build graph that I have running, it suddenly spiked by several thousand. I think it was about 200,000 reports suddenly went straight into the database. Surprisingly, I was expecting the builder to actually take several days to cope with it, but in actual fact it took about a day. The way we've got everything set up, it just coped with it, which was quite nice to see. But essentially we reported everything, all the beta tests, reports that have been submitted, we just grabbed en masse and shoved them into the live database. And everything pretty much worked as we hoped. There were a few glitches, but pretty much there were the sort of things that you as a user viewing the website you'd never really be aware of. We did a quiet release in June, basically on the 1st of June, and I just switched it so that the Metabase reports were coming in into the CPAN Testers. We've actually got two generators based off the same similar code base, with one feeding from the NMTP, one feeding from the Metabase, and both feeding into the CPAN Stats database. We watched it just to make sure everything was running smoothly, and then in July we actually announced it to the world saying, yeah, we've now got CPAN 2.0, CPAN Testers 2.0. So from August onwards, pretty much this month is mostly going to be looking at CPAN testers who are still using the CPAN Testers 1.0, which is a submission via the SMTP. We're going to be looking at them and helping them move across to the CPAN Testers 2.0 infrastructure. And essentially that's how it's going to look pretty much from September onwards. That will be the only form of submission processing that's going to be going through the system. We won't have the SMTP. The benefit of this is we're going to be able to accept many, many more reports. So hopefully we're going to get more interesting reports. With the amount of volume that we're seeing being added to CPAN these days, it's quite important we can cope with those kind of volumes. And certainly at the moment, pretty much the builder that I run, it can handle roughly around about between 30 and 50,000 requests a day, which is far more than we've ever seen, really. So I'm quite pleased with that. Yeah, we'll be switching, hopefully, if everything goes to plan, we'll be switching off the 1st of September. So if you are a CPAN tester using the old SMTP, have a look at the ways that you can move across. If you do get any problems, please shout on Amy's etc., which I'll mention in a bit. So that's kind of how we've got to where we are. I'm basically just going to go into a little bit of detail of what the Metabase is and how the test reports are